The first time I saw her name in our bank records, I was sitting at my kitchen table in slipper socks with a yellow grocery pad under my hand and a pot of chili starting to simmer on the stove. It should have been the most ordinary part of my Sunday. The kind that makes you believe your life is solid because the small things are in place. The dishwasher was running. A college game murmured from the living room where Ethan had left it on before heading out to rake his mother's front walk. I had a coupon tucked under my phone case for the pharmacy and a load of towels half folded beside me. Then I opened the joint checking account to see whether the electric bill had cleared and found a woman's full name, where no woman's full name should have been. Marisol Vega. For a second I thought it was one of those payment processing errors where a random label appears where a company name should be. But I looked again and felt something small and cold move through me. The transfer amount was $280. Not huge. Not impossible. Not even dramatic enough on its face to belong to the beginning of anything that could ruin a marriage. But it sat there between the gas bill and Kroger in a way that made my body go still before my thoughts did. People's names do that. They arrive with shape and implication. They make a line item look personal. I tapped it open. There was no business logo, no invoice number. I recognized. No note beyond the date and completed transfer status, just her name. I told myself there was probably a simple answer. There usually was. Ethan was the kind of man cashiers thank twice. He brought my car around when it rained without making a show of it. He called if he was going to be 20 minutes late. When my mother had the flu last winter, he dropped off Gatorade and saltines before I'd even left work. If you had asked me that morning whether I trusted my husband, I would have said yes without hesitation and probably felt proud of myself for meaning it. Still, I kept staring. The chili gave a lazy bubble on the stove. Somewhere outside, somebody's leaf blower started up and then stalled out. The kitchen window over the sink had that thin waviness old glass gets in houses built before people expected everything to look perfect forever. We rented the little brick duplex on Hawthorne because it was close to my clinic and only 10 minutes from Lorraine's condo, which Ethan had called practical in the same tone he used for things that were not really up for debate. I had learned over 2 years of marriage and 3 years before that the Bell family liked the word practical the way some people liked prayer. It covered a lot. It made preference sound like necessity. It made decisions feel impersonal even when they cut straight through somebody. I clicked back to the account summary and saw her name again. 2 weeks earlier. Same amount. Then once more the month before that. I felt the room sharpen around me. Naomi Ethan's voice came through the back door before I heard his boots. He stepped inside, carrying cold air with him, shoulders broad under an old gray sweatshirt, cheeks pink from the wind. He bent to untie his work boots on the mat, and I watched him with that strange double vision people must have right before the first crack becomes visible in something they thought was whole. One part of me saw my husband. The other saw a man walking into a room where a woman's name was glowing on our bank account. "You're back early," I said. Her front walk wasn't as bad as I thought. He straightened and rubbed his hands together. "It smells good in here." I almost said, "There's a woman named Marisol Vega in our checking account." Instead, I heard myself answer. I started the chili. That was how I was. I did not leap toward ugliness unless ugliness was already standing in front of me with its hand raised. Ethan crossed the kitchen and kissed the top of my head quick and warm. "You okay?" I looked up at him. His face was open in that familiar way that had always disarmed me even when I was irritated. It was one of the things people loved about him. Ethan never looked defensive at first. He looked concerned. It made you feel a little unreasonable before you had even said your piece. "There's a name in the account I don't recognize," I said carefully. "Marisol Vega." He reached for the fridge handle, then paused. It was only a second, maybe less, but I saw it. "Oh," he said. "Not who, not, what do you mean?" "Just, oh," I kept my voice light. "Who is that?" He opened the fridge and took out a bottle of water. "Nobody." I actually laughed a little then, not because it was funny, but because the answer was so bad it did not fit the room. "She's not nobody if she's getting money from us." He twisted the cap off and drank before answering. "It's nothing, Naomi." There it was. That tone, soft enough to sound kind, smooth enough to make me feel like I was already standing too close to the edge of overreaction. I turned my phone toward him. "There are 3 transfers." He glanced at the screen but did not come closer. "She helped my mom out a couple times. With what, just errands. Some paperwork stuff. Mom got overwhelmed." I let that sit for a moment. "So why wouldn't you tell me?" He sighed, but not heavily, more like I was making him step backward into a conversation he had hoped would stay simple, because it wasn't a whole thing. The dishwasher clicked into a new cycle. I could hear the football announcer rising from the living room like he belonged to another house. I said, anything that comes out of our joint account is kind of a thing. Ethan rested one hand on the counter. It was for my mother and Naomi. That should not have mattered to the question I was asking, but in our marriage, and especially around Lorraine, it always did. His mother had a way of turning any request for clarity into a test of character. If you pressed too hard, you were not being careful with money. You were being cold. If you wanted to be consulted, you were not asking for respect. You were making family need about yourself. I knew that logic because I had spent years trying not to trigger it. I'm not saying don't help her, I said. I'm asking why I'm finding out from the account. He came around the island, then close enough to lean one hip against it. Because Mom was embarrassed. Okay, she didn't want to make a production out of needing help. Marisol's a woman from church who's done some part-time organizing and rides for people. It wasn't worth upsetting my mother over. Upsetting my mother, not discussing with my wife, not explaining, not even forgetting to mention it. The sentence landed where it wanted to. I looked back at the transfers. $280 3 times. He shrugged. That's not crazy. No, I said. It's not crazy. It's regular. His expression changed a fraction, something smaller than annoyance, larger than nothing. You're making it sound weird. I stared at him. He softened immediately. Hey, I'm not saying you can't ask. I'm saying there's a simple answer. That was the part that got under my skin, not the content. The management of it, the way he always seemed to stand one emotional floor above the argument, speaking down gently as if my feelings arrived less organized than his. I locked my phone and stood up to stir the chili. The wooden spoon knocked lightly against the pot. I could feel him watching my back. When were you planning to tell me? I asked. I wasn't hiding it. I turned. You didn't tell me. He spread his hands. Because it was just helping my mom. A memory slid across my mind so fast it felt borrowed. Thanksgiving last year, Lorraine in her pearl earrings smiling at me over the cranberry dish and saying to Ethan, not to me, you always were good at handling these things quietly. At the time I had thought she meant his patience. I had smiled and kept passing plates. Now that sentence came back with a different shape. I said, how long has Marisol been helping her? A little while. That's not an answer. He rubbed the back of his neck. A few months maybe. On and off. A few months. My chest tightened. I was the one who brought Lorraine soup when she got bronchitis in February. I was the one who picked up her prescriptions twice when Ethan got stuck at work. I was the one who sat on her condo sofa in my scrubs eating stale shortbread while she explained again that she had never liked digital banking and that modern customer service was humiliating. All that time there had apparently been another woman in the picture. Not because I wasn't willing, because I hadn't been asked. And worse than that, I'd not been told enough to notice I wasn't being asked. The back of my neck went hot. I just don't understand why this had to be secret, I said. Ethan's mouth tightened. It wasn't secret. I held his gaze. Then say her name without acting like I'm the problem. For the first time, silence stretched between us in a way that felt less like marriage and more like weather. Then his face settled again, calm as ever. Marisol Vega, he said. She meant nothing, Naomi. She was just helping my mother. That's all. I wanted to believe him. I really did. Not because the explanation was good, but because my whole life with him was built on the belief that when something mattered, he would meet me inside it honestly. Instead, I said, okay. He nodded, relieved too quickly, and reached for a bowl from the drying rack as if the conversation had returned to ordinary life. As if I had. As if naming the woman had fixed the feeling of her. An hour later, we drove to Lorraine's condo with a container of chili wrapped in a dish towel. The late November light had already gone thin and bluish over the strip mall signs and bare maple branches. Ethan carried the food, I carried the cornbread. Lorraine opened the door wearing a cream cardigan button rung at the top, the kind of detail people notice when they are tired or frightened or pretending not to be either. Well, there's my domestic cavalry, she said. She kissed Ethan's cheek. She touched my arm. Inside, the condo smelled faintly like lemon furniture polish and whatever floral hand soap she had been using since before I met her. The television was on low in the den, a puzzle set half finished on the coffee table. I knew this place well enough to find glasses without asking, and still there were moments in it when I felt like a guest who had gotten good at being useful. Dinner was easy in the way strained things often are. Ethan talked about a leak at work. Lorraine complained about the pharmacist changing manufacturers again. I kept waiting for Marisol's name to come up naturally, but it never did. Then while I was spooning chili into her freezer containers for later, Lorraine said from the kitchen table, Some things are easier handled quietly. I looked up. What do you mean? She was smoothing the edge of her napkin with 2 fingers, not looking at me. Oh, nothing pointed. Just that getting older is humiliating enough without making every little practical arrangement into a family discussion. Ethan did not say anything. It was one of those moments so small no outsider would have called it unkind. But I felt the words land exactly where they were meant to. Family discussion. Not our discussion. Not something I had a right to, something larger than me, older than me, already decided. I said I didn't realize discussion was the problem. Lorraine finally lifted her eyes, calm and cool. No, sweetheart. The problem is burden. Sweetheart. I smiled because women like me are raised to survive rooms before we are raised to trust ourselves in them. We stayed another 40 minutes. I washed the bowls. Ethan took out her trash. Lorraine pressed leftovers on us as if we had not brought dinner in the first place. On the drive home, Ethan reached over at a red light and squeezed my knee. You okay? That tone again. Tender. Containing. I looked out at the dark storefronts, the gas station glowing on the corner, the giant inflatable turkey still shivering under floodlights in front of the feed store. I'm fine, I said. But I wasn't. The next morning on my way to work, I stopped at the bank branch by the Walgreens and asked the woman at the counter if she could print the last 3 months of joint account transfers. She smiled, asked for my ID, and handed the packet over in less than 5 minutes. I sat in my car with the heater ticking and the papers spread across my lap. Marisol Vega. Not 3 transfers, 7. And every one of them had gone out on a Thursday regular as a heartbeat, I sat there with the heat blowing dusty air at my knees and the bank printouts trembling once in my hands before I forced them still. Thursday. The same day Ethan usually stopped by Lorraine's place after work because, as he put it, she hated ending the week alone. The same day I worked late clinic hours and usually grabbed something small for dinner on the drive home because by the time I got back he had already eaten with his mother or picked up takeout for both of them. So that was how you hid a system from your wife. You fit it inside the shape of an existing routine and trusted her own decency to keep her from examining it too closely. I should have gone straight to work. Instead, I folded the papers, carefully slid them back into the envelope, and called my mother from the parking lot. Ruth answered on the second ring. You okay? It was 8:12 in the morning. No, hello, no, how are you? Just that. My mother had a way of hearing strain before I gave it words. I found 7 transfers, I said. There was a pause. I could hear a cabinet shut on her end, then the scrape of a chair. 7 every Thursday. Same amount. Same name. She let that settle. What did Ethan say? That she helped Lorraine a couple times? Errands. Paperwork. And do you believe him? The question made me stare through the windshield at the gray sky over the Walgreens sign. People always ask whether you trust your instincts, but that was never my problem. My problem was that I trusted them and then talked myself out of what they meant. I believe he's telling it the way he wants it told, I said. That isn't the same thing. No. Another pause. My mother never filled silence just to make me feel better. When I was a kid, that used to frustrate me. As an adult, I understood it was one of the cleanest forms of respect I had ever been given. Finally, she said, Honey, has that family ever once made you part of a practical decision before it was already decided? I opened my mouth and closed it again. There were a dozen examples, all small enough to excuse at the time. Lorraine changing the dinner reservation for Easter and telling Ethan because she didn't want Naomi bothered at work. Ethan volunteering us to host Christmas Eve and calling it a good opportunity for me to make the apartment feel more like home. The afternoon Lorraine's water heater burst, and Ethan spent $600 from savings to help cover the replacement before he mentioned it to me over Chinese takeout, his face already arranged into that patient expression that said the decent response had been pre-selected. At each moment I'd told myself the same story. This is family, this is temporary, this is pressure, this is what flexibility looks like when you love people. No, I said. Then don't call this confusion if it isn't. I closed my eyes. My mother's voice softened, but not by much. You stayed quiet because you didn't want to be the woman they already half believed you were. That one hit so hard I had to grip the steering wheel. I got to work 3 minutes before my first patient call and spent the morning explaining insurance benefits with a voice so steady it almost felt borrowed. Around noon, while I was verifying a prior authorization, I pulled the bank printouts back out and looked harder at the transfer references. Each one had a short code after Marisol's name I had missed the first time. Not random letters, an abbreviation, PPCS. I typed it into my phone under the desk. Pine Ridge Private Care Services. The website came up plain and corporate, pale blue banner, stock photo, smiles, a list of elder support options that tried too hard to sound dignified. Companion visits, medication reminders, transportation coordination, light household assistance, care planning support. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Lorraine had said more than once that she would die before she let strangers manage her. Ethan had repeated it to me with the sort of fond exasperation sons use when they want you to understand a difficult mother without criticizing her too openly. She's old-fashioned. She's proud. She just needs us, not outsiders. Us. I had built a whole emotional life inside that word. By 4:30, I had convinced myself there was still a chance this was smaller than it looked. Maybe Marisol was freelance help. Maybe Pine Ridge handled billing but not formal care. Maybe Ethan had panicked and made something sound casual because Lorraine was ashamed. Maybe. I was a smart woman, and still I could feel myself reaching for every softer version first. That, I realized, was how I had lasted so long in the Bell family without breaking. I kept translating disrespect into circumstance because circumstance hurt less. I drove to Pine Ridge after work with my stomach tight and my hands cold around the wheel. The office sat in a low brick building behind a dentist and a tax service with a narrow lobby that smelled faintly of printer toner and citrus cleaner. A fake ficus tree drooped in one corner. 2 framed watercolor prints of sailboats hung crooked over a row of gray chairs. It was the kind of place designed to say trust us without making promises. A woman at the front desk looked up. She had dark hair pinned back and reading glasses hanging on a blue cord against her blouse. "Can I help you?" I stepped closer and set the folded bank printouts on the counter without opening them. "I'm sorry. I'm trying to confirm whether you have someone named Marisol Vega working through here." The woman glanced at her screen. "She's one of our care coordinators, yes." "Care coordinators?" I felt the floor tilt and then hold. "I'm Naomi Bell," I said, and heard the slight catch in my own voice. "My husband is Ethan Bell. His mother is Lorraine Bell." Recognition flickered over her face so quickly that if I had not been looking for it, I might have missed it. "Oh," she said. "Of course." The same word Ethan had used. She turned back to the computer. "I'm Tessa. Let me just pull up Mrs. Bell's file." Every muscle in my body went alert. Her file. Tessa clicked twice, then looked up with an easy, administrative smile. "Yes, since you're family, I can—" She stopped. Not because I interrupted, because she finally really looked at me. I kept my hands flat on the counter. "Since I'm family, you can what?" A small professional caution came into her face, but it arrived too late. The damage had already been done. "I'm sorry," she said carefully. "I assumed you were already aware of the arrangement." Arrangement. The word moved through me with a strange, clean violence. "What arrangement?" I asked. Tessa hesitated. "Mrs. Bell has had companion support and transportation coordination through us since spring. Vega handles most of it personally. There was some medication pickups at first, then recurring weekly support, some billing help, scheduling, that sort of thing." Spring. The room became intensely specific. The hum of the printer behind her, the fluorescent light buzzing faintly above the entry mat, the tiny bowl of peppermints on the corner of the desk, all of it too real for me to still be misunderstanding. I said, "My husband told me she helped a couple times." Tessa's mouth changed only slightly. Not pity, something worse. The face of a person who has worked long enough with families to recognize the outline of exclusion. "I see." I reached into my bag and pulled out the bank printouts. "These are from our joint account." She looked at them, then back at me. "Mrs. Bell's services have been billed privately, monthly, broken into weekly transfers at your husband's request." At your husband's request. My throat tightened so hard I had to swallow before I could speak again. "Did anyone ever need my authorization for that?" Tessa blinked. "There's an updated payment authorization pending now, actually. We switched software last month, so we've been getting signatures refreshed. I thought that might be why you were here today." She turned slightly and lifted a folder from the shelf behind her. My name was on the top page. Not as account holder, not as spouse, not even as joint payer. Emergency family contact. That was the moment everything rearranged itself. Not because it was the cruelest detail, because it was the neatest. Ethan had built a whole system where my money could move, my labor could still be expected, my last name could make things easier, and I could still be placed one step outside the real circle of knowledge. Close enough to be useful, not close enough to be consulted. A memory came back so hard it nearly made me dizzy. July, Lorraine's condo me, kneeling by her hall closet with a tote bag of old pharmacy receipts because Ethan had asked if I could help sort a few things. Lorraine standing over me saying in that cool voice of hers, "You're so good at details, Naomi." I had gone home feeling absurdly chosen, trusted. I understood now that while I was sorting old papers on the floor, somebody else had already been handling the real ones. I heard myself ask, was I ever discussed as a reason not to tell me? Tessa did not answer right away, and that was answer enough. She pushed her glasses up with one finger and said quietly, "Families usually have their own internal decisions about who manages what, internal decisions." It took everything in me not to cry right there at that cheap counter under the watercolor sailboats. Not because I was weak, because humiliation when it is finally named has a physical force. It leaves you standing in your own life like a guest who has opened the wrong door. I looked at the unsigned authorization form again. Naomi Bell, emergency family contact, not wife, not partner, not payer, not decision maker. Something in me went still then, not numb, clear. I took out my phone. Tessa said, "Ms. Bell, I'm sorry if you didn't do anything I said." My voice sounded different to my own ears, lower, cleaner. I pulled up Ethan's number and hit call. He answered on the third ring. "Hey," he said, "everything okay?" I looked at the folder with my name on it at the line waiting for a signature. Nobody had bothered to mention to me at the records of a private arrangement built out of my marriage and around me. "No," I said. "It isn't." He went quiet. "I'm at Pine Ridge," I said. "You need to come here now." "Naomi, the money is not the worst part," I said, and for the first time since I had seen Marisol Vega's name I heard no softness in myself at all. "That's your problem. Come here." "No," I said. "It isn't." He went quiet. "I'm at Pine Ridge," I said. "You need to come here now, Naomi." "The money is not the worst part," I said, and for the first time since I had seen Marisol Vega's name I heard no softness in myself at all. "That's your problem. Come here." I ended the call before he could answer. Tessa stood very still behind the desk, both hands resting on the folder she had half pulled from the shelf. She looked like a woman who had spent enough years in administrative offices to recognize the moment a family story split open in front of her and became something she could not fix with a form. "I can give you a room if you need privacy," she said. I looked at the unsigned authorization page again. My name printed neatly where no real authority had ever been given to me. Emergency family contact. The kind of role people assign to women they want close enough to help but far enough away not to matter. "Yes," I said. "That would be good." She led me into a small consultation room with a round table, 2 padded chairs, and a tissue box set in the middle like a prediction. Through the narrow window beside the blinds, I could see the parking lot and the dry brown leaves skittering low across the pavement every time the wind caught them. The room smelled faintly of coffee and copper heat. Tessa left the folder with me and closed the door gently behind her. I sat down and opened it. There it all was. Lorraine Bell. Companion care, transportation coordination, medication support, weekly scheduling. Ethan Bell listed as primary family contact and billing manager. My name attached only where it could be useful if something went wrong. I read the dates twice. Spring, summer, early fall, all the months in which I had brought casserole dishes, picked up prescriptions, sorted old receipts, listened to Lorraine's sigh about aging like it was whether none of us could change. All the months Ethan had come home and kissed my forehead and said he was tired from helping his mother, as if help was the whole truth and not a shape he had already edited for me. I could feel my pulse in my throat, but underneath it something steadier had begun to take hold. I'd spent so much of my marriage trying to be fair before I was hurt, trying to give context before I gave myself permission to feel what was happening. It had always seemed like maturity. Sitting there with the folder open and my name misplaced on the page, I understood something I should have known years ago. They had mistaken my fairness for pliability. The first person who arrived was Lorraine. Of course it was. I heard her voice at the front desk before I saw her clipped and low with irritation that only sharpened my sense of her. Tessa opened the consultation room door a crack and asked, "Would you like her in here?" I folded my hands in my lap. "Yes." Lorraine stepped in, wearing her camel coat lipstick still careful, one glove half peeled off as if she had dressed in a hurry, but not enough of one to forget herself. When she saw me sitting with the folder open, something flickered in her face. Not surprise exactly. Calculation, then displeasure that calculation had become necessary. "Naomi," she said, "what is all this?" I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because that sentence had lived under my skin for months in reverse. What is all this? As if I were the one who had brought confusion into the room. I looked at her and said, That depends on whether you want the paperwork answer or the honest one. Her chin lifted a fraction. I don't appreciate being summoned like this. I wasn't summoning you, I said. I was asking my husband to come explain why a care office knows more about my marriage than I do. Her mouth tightened. For a second, neither of us spoke. I could hear a phone ringing at the front desk, then stopping. The sound of someone dragging a cart down the hallway. A normal workday holding still around the edges of my life while mine was rearranging itself. Lorraine sat down slowly across from me, placing her gloves on the table with the same care she used to fold napkins after dinner. If this is about the payments Ethan told me he meant to explain. I nodded. When she did not answer, the door opened again before she could try. Ethan stepped into the room looking windblown and pale, his hair still slightly damp at the temples from where he must have run a hand through it on the drive over. He looked first at me, then at the folder, then at his mother. For the first time since I had met him, he did not seem to know which version of himself to enter the room as. Naomi, he said quietly. That voice had carried me through flu seasons and flat tires and hard weeks at work. It had soothed me on nights when I was too tired to sort my own feelings. It had always sounded like safety. Now I heard the structure beneath it. I said, "Sit down." He did. For a moment, none of us moved. Ethan kept his hands clasped hard between his knees. Lorraine had one palm flat on the table, the other resting over her glove, as if even now she meant to stay composed. I looked at Ethan first. "You told me she helped your mother a couple times," I said. "You told me it wasn't a whole thing. You told me she meant nothing." He inhaled. "Naomi, I know how this looks." "No." I shook my head once. "That's exactly where you start lying. This does not merely look bad, it is bad. Don't move it into appearances because you don't like the truth." He stared at me and I saw the shock of it land. Not because I had raised my voice, because I hadn't. I'd touched the top page of the folder. "This has been going on since spring. Weekly, structured, billed in, managed. Paid out of our joint account in pieces because that made it easier to hide. There is an updated authorization waiting for a signature I was never told about. And my role in all of it is emergency contact." Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. "I wasn't trying to erase you." Lorraine let out a quiet breath, not quite a sigh. "No one erased you. This was a practical arrangement during a difficult period." There it was. Practical. Difficult, the old liturgy. I turned to her. "Do you know what makes this humiliating?" Her expression chilled. "I'm sure you'll tell us." "Yes," I said. "I will. It isn't that you needed help. It isn't even that you used money we should have talked about first. It's that both of you decided I did not need to know because you had already decided what kind of woman I was." Ethan opened his mouth, but I kept going. "You made me into the problem before I had a chance to speak. Not because I ever refused to help. I never did. Not because I'm careless with your mother. I wasn't. I drove her to appointments. I picked up her prescriptions. I sat on her living room floor sorting receipts while another woman handled the part you thought actually mattered." I looked at Lorraine then and I saw something move in her face. Not softness. Memory. Shame trying not to become visible. "You let me do the work that made me look kind," I said, while keeping me outside the work that gave me standing. Lorraine's eyes narrowed. "You are making this sound crueler than it was." I felt something settle all the way down in me. "No," I said. "I'm making it sound accurate." The room went still. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I didn't tell you because Mom was embarrassed. And because every time money comes up with family, you get tense about fairness, and I knew this would become a hole." He stopped. Not because I interrupted him. Because he heard himself. I nodded once. "Say it." He swallowed. "A whole issue." "There," I said softly. "That's it. Not cheating, not panic, not confusion. You both decided I would be an issue, so you built a system around me." His face changed then. Something in him finally had to look at itself. "That's not," he began. "It is," I said. "You did not protect your mother from me. You protected your right to decide. I did not count." Tessa was standing just outside the partly open door now, not intruding, not leaving either. I could sense her there, the quiet witness of someone who had nothing personal at stake and had still become part of the truth because truth had happened in front of her. Lorraine straightened in her chair. "You are young, Naomi. You don't understand what it costs to lose control of your own life in pieces." The words might once have softened me. Instead, they opened something else. "My mother understands that," I said. "She understands exactly what it costs. That's probably why she never once taught me to call disrespect practical just because it arrived in a soft voice." Lorraine looked at me as if I had slapped her. I had not. I had done something worse. I had refused her the right to define the moral terms of the room. Ethan's eyes lifted to mine. What do you want me to say? That question hurt more than if he had shouted, because buried inside it was the same old belief that the moment could still be managed if only he found the right language. I leaned back in the chair and looked at him properly, maybe for the first time in months. I want you to understand that the money is not the worst part, I said. The worst part is that I would have said yes. I would have helped. I would have sat down with you and figured it out and adjusted and shown up, because that is what I have been doing since the day I married into your family. And instead of trusting me with that, you trusted me only with the parts that were easy to take from me. His face broke then, not theatrically, not with tears, just with the awful plainness of a man hearing the truth in a language he can no longer defend himself against. Lorraine looked down at her gloves. The silence that followed was not empty. It was the collapse of the story they had both been telling themselves, that this had been necessity, that Naomi was tender but impractical, that the real adults had simply made a difficult call. I reached for the authorization form and turned it so both of them could see the blank signature line. I'm not signing this, I said. Not because your mother doesn't deserve care. She does. Not because I don't understand age or pride or fear. I do. I'm not signing it because I will not put my name under a system built on making me smaller than I am. Ethan's voice was barely above a whisper. Naomi. I stood. For a second, no one else moved. Then Lorraine lifted her head and said my name, not sweetheart, not in that cool dismissive register that always made affection feel like etiquette. Naomi. It was the first time she had said it as if I were a full adult person standing in front of her and not a role she had reluctantly accommodated. The recognition came far too late to heal anything cleanly, but it mattered all the same. I picked up my bag. The bank printouts were still folded inside, the edges softened now from how tightly I'd held them. I looked at Ethan once more and saw with a strange calm that whatever happened next in our marriage would have to happen on ground that did not exist this morning. I'm going home, I said. Not to wait for your explanation. Just home. No one tried to stop me. I walked out past the front desk and through the glass door into the late afternoon. The air had turned sharper while we were inside. Somewhere down the block, an ambulance siren rose, then faded, carrying its thin, lonely urgency through the cold. Dry leaves scraped across the pavement in restless little circles around my shoes. I stood there for a moment with my hand still on the door handle, breathing. It hurt. God, it hurt. My marriage was still behind me in that building, altered and uncertain and stripped of the lie that had made it easy to inhabit. But underneath the hurt there was something warmer than triumph and steadier than relief. Myself. Not the version they had managed. Not the agreeable daughter-in-law, not the emergency contact, not the woman who could be trusted with casseroles but not decisions. Just me standing in the cold, with my name returned to me whole. I let go of the door and walked to my car while the leaves kept moving over the asphalt like dry paper, and for the first time in longer than I wanted to admit, I did not feel outside my own life.